I'm Joe Budd from 30th Street Station. This is the Rorschach, Georgia update from the 23rd of July, 2026. Quick summary of what's going down in Georgia. Saturday the 18th, a hotel fight near Telavi turned into Georgia's biggest story of the week. It began with wedding guests arguing with Russian-speaking tourists on a hotel balcony. Minutes later, the groom's brother, Georgi Chikladze, walked into one of the women's rooms and struck her, sending her to the ground. This was caught on camera. From there, the accounts split. Wedding guests say the tourists insulted them first and poured water on the sound equipment. Chikladze says the woman grabbed him by the throat before he hit her. Her friends say the attack was unprovoked and happened simply because she was speaking Russian. Police arrested Chikladze the next day on minor bodily harm charges. Court released him on bail this week. Link in the show notes for the video. Last week, we covered TV host Vacho Sanaya getting fined 6,000 lari, which is over $2,000, for satirical Facebook posts about ruling party figures Shalva Papuashvili and Lado Bojadze. Right after that ruling, Sanaya posted again, joking that since he got fined for telling people not to call the two men dicks, people should apparently go ahead and call them dicks after all. Wednesday the 22nd, the court decided to send him to jail for 14 days over this post. Prosecutors say that Sanaya was not paying fines for previous posts and not attending his hearings, so they decided this punishment had to be used. This is the first time in Georgian history someone has spent time in jail for a Facebook post. The same day, shooting broke out in Vera, one of central Tbilisi's most prominent neighborhoods. Eyewitnesses say a man opened fire on 3 teenage boys sitting in a car simply because they were laughing, then shot at a woman standing nearby. One of the wounded, a 17-year-old boy, died at the clinic. 3 others, including the woman, were injured. The attacker was arrested soon after. Authorities say he put up armed resistance. Police have charged him with attempted murder of 2 or more people under aggravated circumstances for which he might face life in prison. Investigation's ongoing. The motive is unknown. Also on the same day, 3 men attacked stand-up comedian Onise Okriashvili right outside his home in Tbilisi, leaving him with torn clothes and bruises on his head. Video of the attack shows the men referencing a recent stand-up bit where Okriashvili joked about Nodar Dumbadze, one of Georgia's most beloved 20th century novelists, using a vulgar line. For days before the attack, pro-government media had been running a smear campaign against Okriashvili over the same joke, framing it as an attack on Georgian values. As we can see, stochastic terrorism at work by the Georgian government. Okriashvili is an active participant in Georgia's pro-European protests. One attacker later turned himself into police and was arrested. Link to the video in the show notes. On Thursday the 16th, Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bochorishvili traveled to Washington for an incredibly stupid performative ministerial meeting on, I say with air quotes, far-left political terrorism, hosted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. She accused radical groups of using the language of democracy while actually working to weaken state institutions. She held up Georgia as proof, blaming coordinated campaigns against the judiciary and electoral systems, both of which are controlled by the government and horrendous. She also accused international institutions of pressuring sovereign states through resolution. As they say, every accusation is an admission. Chief Trump fascist Stephen Miller's speech at the Festival of Hypocrisy was particularly revolting and pungent for those who'd like to check the vibe. On Wednesday the 15th, 32-year-old IT specialist Georgi Kvitsaridze started a hunger strike in Kutaisi prison. Kvitsaridze is the man behind one of the year's biggest scandals. He was the person who hacked into the police's internal messaging system and pulled out dozens of videos showing torture in a Kobuleti police station. Footage that dates back to the summer of 2022 and includes policemen burning cigarettes on detainees, beating them, and making sexual threats. TV Pirveli aired the material last month. The Interior Ministry said it had already arrested the officers involved back in February, months before the leak went public. Kvitsaridze's mother says police charged her son with drug possession right after they realized the breach within their system. On Tuesday the 21st, Transparency International Georgia said it had identified 91 political prisoners in the country, applying the legal test set out in the Council of Europe's 2012 resolution. The definition of political prisoner. The organization judges each case based on 5 criteria. Does it violate fundamental human rights? Is the detention politically motivated with no real connection to a crime? Is the punishment clearly disproportionate? Does it involve discriminatory treatment, or does the trial fail to meet fair trial standards? Program manager Sandro Baramidze said at a briefing that most cases meet more than one of these criteria. He named journalist Mzia Maklobeli and opposition leader Elena Khoshtaria as the two cases which met all five of them. On Sunday the 19th, a Tbilisi-Batumi train got held up for about 20 minutes after a conductor called the police over banners some passengers were carrying. Those passengers were family members of demonstrators criminally charged at Georgia's pro-European protest, traveling the country with photos and posters of their imprisoned relatives to raise public awareness. Politician Keona Chalidze, who's accompanying the families on their tour, said police asked them to take the banners down, but they refused, saying no one could stop them from riding the train. The police filed a report and let the train go on. On Tuesday the 21st, South Ossetia's Russian-backed authorities accused the EU of pressuring Syria's new government to walk back its recognition of South Ossetia and Abkhazia as independent states. South Ossetia is a separatist Georgian region under Russian military occupation. The accusation follows a statement from Lithuania saying the EU is ready to help Syria's parliament undo foreign policy decisions made under former ruler Bashar al-Assad, including his recognition of the two Georgian regions and his backing of Russia's stance on Ukraine. Russia itself declared Abkhazia and South Ossetia independent back in September 2008, just weeks after invading Georgia. Today, only 5 countries recognize them: Russia, Syria, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Nauru. On Friday the 17th, online media outlet Publica published testimony of the death of Alan Kakitashvili, a 38-year-old who collapsed in a Tbilisi police station in June 2025 and died 2 days later in a hospital. Police say he fell ill on his own, and they called an ambulance right away, but his friend Irakli Tatunashvili, who was held in the same station that day, says officers beat him in a basement cell, and he heard Kakitashvili screaming in pain until the screaming suddenly stopped. 2 other men were blamed for injuring Kakitashvili in an earlier restaurant fight, which was the reason they were in the police station in the first place, and got 2 and 6-year sentences over his death. Tatunashvili believes those 2 are innocent and that the police beating killed Kakitashvili, not the fight. On Wednesday, the 15th opposition leader, Zura Japaridze, got hospitalized after a car hit him while he was riding a scooter in Tbilisi. He says he suffered a concussion, bruises, and some memory loss. Doesn't recall the crash itself. He says the car cut him off and he slid along the road afterwards. Police opened an investigation into the driver, whom they say they've identified. Japaridze is one of the 8 opposition figures already facing Georgia's so-called sabotage case, where prosecutors accuse them of crimes against the state, carrying 7 to 15 years if convicted. An article on geopolitics by Sergei Kapanadze entitled "Georgia After Russia, Ukraine War, the Security File Europe Must Not Ignore." Georgia argues that however the Ukraine war ends, Europe cannot afford to shelve the issue of Georgia's occupied territories again. The piece lays out 3 possible endings to the war and warns that Georgian Dream or the Kotzebue will spin even a messy stalemate as proof its policy of avoiding confrontation with Russia was right all along. Kapanadze writes that Brussels should resist the urge to punish ordinary Georgians by suspending candidate status or visa-free travel, and instead build a real anti-annexation strategy, which would include targeted sanctions on those enabling Russia's grip on Abkhazia and South Ossetia, a beefed-up EU monitoring mission, and a path to EU extension that doesn't hand Moscow a veto over Georgia's future. Link to the full article in the show notes. And that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. Anything to ask or tell us, email us at info@rorschach.com. If you want to be a peach, check out our t-shirts at rorschach.store. Nachmandis.